When my parents came, it was the first 12 months of Indian immigration in the United States. And we were the only brown family in our little neighborhood.
And he came here with modest support, and he worked very hard in those early years, working multiple jobs, going to school, living a very modest lifestyle.
IBM was essentially, at the time, a WASP company. So I was one of the original guys who broke through that barriers. Today, if an Indian guy, it's more of a credential to become the CEO. My days, it was a deterrent. I built maybe on the shoulders of other people. People who came before me, new people will build on the shoulders of people like me.
From coming over here from India and going to school, and where he lived at first, and how he progressed through businesses, and just the stories are phenomenal. It's truly a great American success story, a great American journey.
In this episode of The American Journey, we share the amazing story of Javad Hassan, who was one of the first Indian Americans to break glass ceilings in the U.S. tech industry. After rising through the ranks of technology giant IBM and fiber optics pioneer AMP, Hassan went on to found one of India's largest high-tech manufacturing companies. Javad K. Hassan was born in 1940 in Aluva, a coastal town in the southern Indian state of Kerala, as the eldest son of Khadija and Nagore Ralter. Ralter was a police official in the Kingdom of Travancore in pre-independence India. His maternal grandfather, Makar Pillai, was a well-known banker, industrialist, and politician who served in the provincial Travancore legislature for nearly a decade before India's independence.
My grandfather was the pioneer in exporting this lemongrass oil and cashew nuts and all from Kerala. So he was number one. And his competitors at the time was Wolcott Brothers, Switzerland, and P.S. Leslie from UK.
After graduation, he worked briefly for two public sector companies, a fertilizer and chemical manufacturing firm called FACT, and the watch and machine tools company HMT, one of the very few electronic manufacturers based in Kerala at the time.
There was no industry in Kerala, only FACT was there.
Hassan came to the United States in September 1966 to enroll for a graduate degree in material science from the University of Bridgeport in Connecticut. He was following in the footsteps of his father-in-law and former Somalia Supreme Court Judge Noor Mohammed.
My father-in-law was a United Nations principal chief legal officer. So he went to Yale Law School, got his PhD from Yale Law School in those days. He was instrumental in me coming here.
Hassan arrived in Bridgeport a year after the landmark Immigration and Naturalization Act was signed by President Lyndon B. Johnson.
LBJ passed the Immigration Reform Act in 1965. So when my parents came, it was the first 12 months of Indian immigration in the United States. So he was the only Indian, the only Muslim, and we were the only brown family in our little neighborhood.
Bridgeport was it was an industrial city at the time. It was full of Polish immigrants, mostly machine tool workers. Bullard Machine Tool Company was making all the wheels for the Ford Motor Company. I found myself a job in Bullard Machine Tool Company. Then I took my courses in the evening. So I became an evening student. So I was working full time.
They lived in an attic. They ate rice and yogurt. And then on Fridays, the treat was to get a Big Mac, which was 39 cents.
When he graduated in 1968, Hassan considered enrolling for a PhD program at a major university in the Northeast, but he also received a job offer from IBM that was too tempting to pass. He joined the company as a senior associate engineer in East Fishkill, New York, roughly an hour to the northwest of Bridgeport.
And the technology was not anywhere here what we are thinking of at this point of time. The computer technology was probably heard only by few academicians. not general public. He started in the ground floor of IBM when the IBM started exploding in terms of information technology services. There are not many companies at that point of time, even to compare with the IBM.
Semiconductor industry was just beginning to start. There was only Texas Instruments had some small discrete semiconductor making, and there was a Fairchild company also. But we were the pioneers in the semiconductor industry.
In 10 years, Hassan became the head of the semiconductor laboratory, which had more than 2,000 engineers.
IBM was essentially, at the time, a WASP company, So I was one of the original guys who broke through that barriers. Today, of course, IBM CEO is an Indian fellow.
He had a lot on his shoulders to prove that he was as capable as an engineer, as capable as a white engineer. So he worked hard. We were the only Brown family in Hopewell Junction. Later on, there was one other Parsi family that moved in. I was the only non-white person in my elementary school.
In 1980, he moved to IBM's world headquarters in Armonk, New York, to assume the position of corporate head of engineering and technology.
Step by step, he moved up as the head of the engineering side. During that time, he had the opportunity to visit other countries like Germany, France, and England, where IBM had the factories. So he had a global view of what is going on in terms of information technology.
In 1984, Hassan was assigned to IBM's newly started Tucson facility in Arizona, where technologies for tape drives and storage units were being developed.
I wanted to diversify myself in the computer industry much better, just only semiconductor. So I wanted to understand the peripherals, like the disk drives and the tape drives and all that. So I started to move to Tucson, Arizona in the I/O, device making.
That was a big step for any Indian engineer to have it in the United States. There was hardly any Indians in the technology side in the top positions.
As my father progressed up in the hierarchy of IBM, I knew that he was doing better because the promotions and titles were getting bigger, but our style of living didn't change. He had a beat-up older car, and our luxury car was a Chevy Impala. We lived below our means because when you work hard for your money, you save every penny because you're not sure what's around the corner. When you're a new immigrant to the country and you're one of the first waves of new immigrants, you don't know whether you're going to be kicked out.
During the period, he helped IBM obtain more than 20 patents in the field of semiconductor technology.
At that point of time, the technology was fast exploding. The semiconductor was the key factor for any computers. So IBM was pioneer in that, and he had a key role in doing that.
In 1988, Hassan moved back to the East Coast to Armonk, New York. However, he realized that after a 20-year career, he had hit the proverbial glass ceiling at IBM. There was no other minority executive at Hassan's level at IBM at the time. Hassan met with then IBM CEO John Akers, wanting to know whether the company was ready to promote him to the next level.
He said, "You just have to be patient," is what Mr. Akers told me at the time.
Hassan joined the electronics conductor manufacturer AMP, a Fortune 500 company, which offered him the position of corporate head of engineering and technology worldwide. He brought IBM's corporate philosophy to AMP, which was then a very conservative company.
They had been doing things the same way kind of for 40 or 50 years since World War II. It was in central Pennsylvania, a very conservative area. The executives of the company were all kind of from the same walk of life and out of the same mold. And he was quite different, not only coming in from IBM, but also coming in from India. It was kind of clear from the onset that he was on a mission to shake things up a little bit. And so in my first meeting with him, I was a young engineer presenting some things that I was working on, and started to go through my presentation in a very methodical, orderly way. And I got as far as slide 1, and he took me in a totally different direction.
During his 10 years at AMP, Hassan helped the company diversify its business from connectors to other technologies, including fiber optics, which was emerging as a new field of communication technology. The AMP division that he headed was bringing in $1.5 billion in sales annually. In 1998, a year before AMP was acquired by Tyco for more than $12 billion, Hassan decided to leave the company. The situation was very similar to the one he was in a decade earlier at IBM. At AMP, he could only rise as high as the president of its global interconnect systems business.
He was a controversial figure at the time, not just because he looked different than other people, but also because he had very aggressive and forward-looking ideas, and you know, he's a visionary. He had a vision for that company. It was in many respects quite different than what the conservative people that have been there for a long time were thinking about as far as the future of the company.
So after 30 years, Hassan retired from corporate America in 1998. But he was not done yet. In fact, at age 57, he was about to start his third career, this time as an entrepreneur.
I was not getting to be the top guy in the large corporations, so I thought I'll start my own companies, and that also was an initial period in startup business anyway.
I think at that point in time, the entrepreneur in him was kind of ready to burst out. You know, I mean, he had spent enough years, enough time in Fortune 100 companies, and these were very large global organizations. And of course he thrived, he was very successful in that, but I think it was time for him to build his own company. And I think he really had a strong desire to do that, and so that's what he set out to do at that point.
In fact, an entrepreneurial spirit had been brewing within him for decades. In the mid-1970s, when his friend V.K. Ravindran started India's first computer company, Hassan was its biggest backer.
Ravindran was one of his classmates in Trivandrum Engineering College. He was a student in Stanford University. Javad was in Connecticut. They were very good friends from Trivandrum days onwards. Ravindran completed his PhD in engineering from Stanford. So he wanted to go back to India. He consulted Javad on how to start a company, and Javad was very forthcoming to help him out in terms of investment and also giving him the guidance to start the PSI in Bangalore. PSI was one of the first electronic computer manufacturing company of that kind in India.
In many ways, PSI was a precursor to India's technology revolution.
At the time I used some of the PSI engineers. I brought them over to my house in Fishkill, New York, and put them into my basement doing programming, software to make medical software for changing the doctors' offices from paper and pencil that they were coming into electronic form.
My dad always had brilliant ideas and was thinking out of the box, and that's the entrepreneurial spirit. Engineering can be very concrete, but he took that and ran with it, and so here he is.
PSI was also a forerunner to Hassan's future entrepreneurial journey. He founded the Nest Group, along with his younger brother, Jahangir, who would serve as its managing director. Nest would be headquartered in Kochi, in central Kerala, not very far from where Hassan grew up. It began manufacturing high-tech equipment for global customers. Hassan decided to make Kerala his manufacturing hub, even though his birthplace did not have any technology infrastructure in place.
When I went to get a license, India at the time, you need a license to operate any company. So I went to Delhi to get license, and he said, why you want to go to Kerala? Kerala, there is no industry there. The Delhi secretaries told me, no, you go to Bangalore or someplace like that. So I said, look, I'm from Kerala, so let me try Kerala out. My argument is there are a lot of talented people, availability there. There is no reason why we should not start an electronic industry in Kerala, because it is very suitable for Kerala. Because Kerala doesn't have much land, and it's not a suitable place to start chemical industries.
And he looked at that opportunity to see that Kerala can be used as a outsourced manufacturing place for semiconductor and the computer circuits.
Electronics business is the right thing to do in Kerala from an industrial point of view. Light industry is what is suited for Kerala. So my theory is you start with where people intensive, technology intensive, not infrastructure intensive, where there is no land and all those available.
Kerala was an agrarian society and they did not have any major industries in Kerala. Today, Kerala is a major contributor to the electronic industry, including hardware and software. And Cochin is the base for the electronic industry today. And Javad's contribution to the industrial development in Kerala is substantial.
The Nest Group's flagship company, SFO Technologies, is now one of the largest electronic manufacturers in India, with an annual turnover of more than $250 million. The company manufactures a wide array of products, ranging from CT scans and ATM machines to cables and power supplies. Its clients include several Fortune 500 companies.
We have more products and services and offerings than a company of our size would typically have, and we do business in more places than a company of our size typically would. And that's what keeps it interesting.
In the past 2 decades, Hassan has launched more than a dozen companies in areas such as fiber optics, software, system integration, IT infrastructure design and implementation, healthcare IT, and digital media. These companies leverage base technologies the group has built over the years, using them as foundations to develop products in different areas. Technology and product developments are Hassan's forte.
His passion is always has been in the technology development. So he always, look for newer technology around the world. He goes and buys small companies who are leaders in certain technology. He acquired several companies from Europe, especially dealing with fiber optics. And most of the time, what he does is he acquires this company and transfer the technology to Kochi for further manufacturing. That helped the Cochin industrial area have a big growth in the hardware technology.
Today, Hassan's companies are also spread out across the world. At one point, he had businesses on 5 continents.
How's the Antarctica office doing? Yeah, we're all over the map. And I've worked all over the world. That's another thing that's been really a blessing working for Hassan. Yeah, I've worked in Japan, I've worked in, I think I counted it up, and I think 48 different countries over the years.
In recent years, Hassan has exited from 2 companies. Nest Software was sold in 2014 for more than $100 million. US-based Opterna was sold to electronics manufacturing giant Belden in 2019. It is Hassan's passion for technology and thorough understanding of both technology and markets that helped him build a technology conglomerate with a worldwide presence.
The companies that I've seen or the leaders that I've seen be successful in business have always started off with a foundational understanding of whatever technology they're trying to bring to the market. And I think one of the reasons, I really feel one of the reasons Dr. Hassan has been so successful is because he has that technology background and that foundation. And he also has an incredibly savvy business sense, which has allowed him to conquer the business world.
Those who worked with Hassan credit 3 personal qualities for his extraordinary success, both as a tech executive and entrepreneur: a legendary drive, love for new ideas, and penchant for taking up new and challenging tasks.
I joke and say, if all your companies were running perfectly, you'd start another one just so you'd have a mess on your hands, so you'd have something to do.
It's always more, it's always better, it's always what more can you do. And so why not?
It's his brain kind of needs that exercise, needs that challenge to keep going. He's a brilliant man. He has a very active intellect, and he needs this to keep going. So it's probably going to help him keep going. Just that desire to be challenged and to kind of feed his brain. It has to be, it's like an animal that has to constantly be fed,
His commitment to really listening to new ideas and listening to new people will continue to ensure that anything he's involved in will be at the forefront of the technology industry.
Over the years, Hassan has been recognized as a technology pioneer, both in the United States and India. In 2012, the New Jersey Institute of Technology conferred on him a Doctor of Science degree for his accomplishments as a leader and visionary in the world of technology companies.
The young and exceptional graduates who acquired good knowledge and are eager and ready to apply this knowledge and contribute to the march of human progress.
Despite his great success in the world of technology, Hassan is a very private person. He and his partner, Sabiha, spend most of their time at their home in McLean, Virginia, an upscale suburb of Washington, D.C. Friends of the couple say that Sabiha is a big influence in Hassan's life.
Sabiha is a very cultured, sophisticated person, and she has got a very big influence in his later part of the life.
Sabiha has been helpful to me in most of these areas that I have been engaged in.
Hassan is extremely proud of the accomplishments of his two daughters, Hafisa Khan and Naureen Hassan, who both stand at the top of their chosen professions. Hafisa is a cardiac electrophysiologist and a partner of a major hospital chain in Plano, Texas. Naureen is the first vice president and chief operating officer of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, the second highest ranking official of the largest and most influential Federal Reserve Bank in the country.
The principle that I have inculcated in them is that you have to be on your own. So they have done that. Whatever they have achieved is their own hard work and initiative. I just gave them the base to do it.
He set the bar high, and obviously, my sister and I watched him and modeled after him. My sister has a degree from Princeton, and she has a degree from Stanford. And I have a degree from UCLA, I have a degree from Harvard, MIT. He taught us that we should dream big, and we did.
Rick Horton, a former Navy SEAL who works with Hassan 3 days a week, says his trainee spends several hours a week in the gym to keep himself physically fit.
He works out with the intensity of guys decades younger than him. Most people younger than him will try to get breaks during the workout, complain a lot. He doesn't. I know he's working in considerable pain, and he doesn't show it. He's very stoic about it. He knows it's good for him, and he's mentally tough.
At age 80, Hassan still has the same urge to pioneer technologies and build companies that he had as a young engineer and executive during his IBM days.
My thing was not to build a billion-dollar business. I was more interested in starting companies and building it to a certain stage and be a pioneer in it, and then I lose interest in it.
Hassan missed out on reaching the pinnacle of corporate America by being there a generation too early, but he has no regret. In fact, he said he is only happy that he was able to play a small part in paving the way for future immigrant executives and Indian American CEOs.
I built maybe on the shoulders of other people, like people who came before me, and new people will build on the shoulders of people like me, and that's the way the evolution takes place. You always build on the shoulders of others. If you think you build it by yourself, it is not. That's the case.
The new people, built on the shoulders of Hassan's generation, include CEOs of major companies such as Google, Microsoft, and Adobe. Even IBM, where Hassan worked for 20 years, now has an Indian CEO.
Today, if you are, an Indian guy, it's more of a credential to become the CEO. My days, it was a deterrent.
A stereotype of the Indian CEO is now a stereotype. Indian engineer, that's almost a cliche. Indian doctor, cliche. Indian IT, cliche. But it wasn't a cliche in 1966.
At the core of Javad Hassan's American journey has been his willingness to work hard and refusal to be stopped by barriers big and small. They were the reasons he achieved extraordinary success.
I mean, he came here with very modest support, not much money in his pocket, and he worked very hard in those early years, working multiple jobs, going to school, living a very modest lifestyle, and people look at him today and all his wealth and his lifestyle that he enjoys today, and they really have no appreciation for where he started. He really worked his way through the American dream.
Javad Hassan created opportunities in the American technology industry when they weren't there by dreaming big. Opportunities not just for himself, but for generations of future immigrants that would follow him. He came with very little other than a desire to succeed. He turned every obstacle on the way into a stepping stone.
From coming over here from India and going to school, and where he lived at first and how he progressed through businesses, just the stories are phenomenal. It's truly a great American success story, a great American journey.
This has been a fascinating experience for me personally, because I didn't have anything from zero to where I am. So it is a fascinating, exciting, hard work, struggle, all of that. This country is what makes you and gives you the opportunities to do what you want to do. No, it is not inhibited by the past. It is always looking ahead to the future. That's greatness of this country.